Chapter 5 again, lesson 4. Start again with the idea of what this chapter is all about. It's about the impact of the Norman Conquest. And again, based around interpretations, truckload of trouble. Was it something that was really negative for the English people? Just before we look at the textbook, I'm just going to show you some stuff on YouTube. It's always good to have a little look at things that are going to be useful for you as well. Short little videos. So at the top, there is a TED Talk. If you notice in the search bar, look, that's all I've just put, and all of a sudden all of these come up. So the TED Talk one is a good one. You can't go wrong with a little BBC Teach cartoon. Right, that's a good one as well. Right, what else we got? Right, this one here, it's a little bit old, but actually it's got quite a lot of information in, so that'll be useful. Right, this one here, from kind of like a French point of view, it's a French TV programme. Right, so it's quite interesting in terms of what they say there. Randomly World War II, ignore that. What else we got? Timelines TV, it's always really good. Then just save the best till last. Look at this one here, History Hits.
After the Battle of Hastings, William doesn't become king immediately. He has to wait for his own.
So, enjoy everyone. Right, let's get back to looking at the textbook. So, lesson 4 has 2 different things that you need to focus on. You need to focus on the concept of law and then the concept of language. So let's start with law first of all. Now, remember, this is all about the impact of the Normans on the English. So before the Normans came along, the Anglo-Saxons, of course, had their own law and order system. You can't run a country without actually having law and order, i.e. crimes, punishments. So it gives you a little example here of what the Anglo-Saxons used to do. So they obviously fined people. That was part of their punishment. So, all a bit grim. And the Anglo-Saxons also loved things called trial by ordeals. Certain brutal side to their kind of like crime and punishment. So if you're accused, as it says there, of committing a crime, you had to hold a red hot poker, red hot bit of iron. That's obviously going to burn your skin. However, right, if it didn't burn, then you were going to be innocent because God intervened. But let's face it, I think everyone was found guilty. Or equally, they did things like trial by water. So the Normans don't get rid of that. Right? The Normans keep those trial by ordeals. So that's continuity, things that they keep. But then they add their own spin on it as well. So they equally add in now something called trial by combat. All right, so that's mentioned obviously down here. So that's, again, change, continuity. All right, so again, get your head around the fact that they didn't completely and utterly get rid of everything that was Saxon. But they did introduce 2 things that were deliberately anti-English, anti-Saxon. Right, these are the Normans showing the English, showing the Saxons who's boss. Right, and the bosses were the Normans. They weren't going to take, obviously, anything from the English in terms of kind of like resistance. We know that. So the murderum fine, murderum. Think murder. It's nice and easy to remember that way. Murderum fine. So you've got your explanation there, really straightforward. If a Norman is killed by a Saxon, and they don't, give themselves up, they'll just punish the whole entire local community. Collective responsibility. I don't care that they're punishing people that had nothing to do with it. It didn't matter. Then you've got the forest law. Right. England, 1066, equally 1086, covered in a lot of forest, so much more forest than what we've got today. Now we've just got houses. William, as it says there, loved his hunting. It's his. That forest is now his. It's not for the English. It's for him. So you create a royal forest and therefore you can punish people that go into that forest. All right, people would have tried to use that forest because it's a source of food, a source of obviously firewood. No. It was now all his, and again, the idea that he can punish people. So you've got some laws that were deliberately introduced to punish the Saxons. Right? It's about saying and telling the Saxons, you are now being controlled by the Normans. It's not your country any longer, it's now ours. Then we've got language. The English, if we remember back to when we looked at the Anglo-Saxon church, were always a little bit rebellious in terms of things like language. They insisted on using English when they were obviously writing kind of like church books, right? And the Bible was in English. That's actually quite rebellious already. They insisted in using their, this is a fancy word, vernacular, their own language. But with the conquest, the Normans bring them in line with everyone else. And the language of Europe is Latin. So now books were written in Latin and written pretty quickly in terms of breaking the English language as a written language. Look, 1070, 4 years. English as a written language now stopped. Latin, as it says there, language of the government, so language of the king, language of the church. So the English people now would be sitting in the church being read to from the Bible, and that Bible would be written in Latin. So they're probably sitting there a little bit bemused. Spoken language, this is a really interesting bit. I didn't really know much about this until I taught it. And in terms of kind of like this real blended language that we actually have today. Right, we've obviously still got some words which are distinctly English. However, a lot of our words have been obviously adapted from French words. Right, and that's the integration of language. But yet, it did come again with a certain kind of like hierarchy. You speak English, you are inferior. You are less than. They're not, William's, you know, he had a little bit of a dabble at speaking English, learning English to begin with. And then he was like, no, I'm not having that. I'll stick with my Latin, I'll stick with my French, thank you very much. So English becomes the language of the poor, the less than, the peasants. Not the kings, not the nobles. So the language of the hierarchy, the kings, the nobles, the government, the church, is very much French. Again, look at some examples, some really good examples to learn of new words. And the best example kind of like for you to get your head around is this whole idea of kind of like approaching animals. And I never really thought about this until, as I said, I taught this a couple of years ago. When you see an animal in a field, right, it's called pig, sheep, cow. It's covered in muck, it's covered in dirt, it's, you know, not pristine, it's not clean, it's dirty. But yet when you serve it on a table, as classically with a glass of wine, it now all of a sudden, it doesn't have that English word attached to it any longer. It's now that French word. So easy one to use, really, really easy one to use, pig and pork. You don't go home and say, I'm eating pig tonight. You say, I'm eating pork tonight. Pork in French is P-O-R-C. Again, like I said, it is right. It's the same. Yeah, you eat lamb, you don't eat sheep. You eat beef, boof. You don't eat cow. Last little point, just for you to get your head round again. Remember all of this in the textbook that you've been sent. That last line, language was a symbol of their inferiority after 1066. The English peasantry, their language now wasn't the same. It had that tinge to it now. It was about being inferior. The superior people, they now speak French. They have Latin, not English. English does survive, we know that. All right, but again, it's all about understanding the impact of the conquest. So, truckload of trouble. Yeah, I think there was some trouble. Those new laws, they're definitely trouble. And again, trouble with your culture, trouble with your language. You had to change.